January 28, 1986. 11:39 a.m. 73 seconds into flight, the Challenger shattered the sky and America's trust. We all know the fireball, the teacher lost, the national trauma. But what if everything you've been told hides darker, stranger truths? NASA ignored a direct warning to cancel the launch. Engineers predicted exactly how it would fail, and were ignored. The crew may have survived the explosion, and a children's icon nearly flew aboard. This is not another tribute. This is a journey into 8 jaw-dropping contradictions buried for decades. Why did NASA risk lives to send a teacher and almost a Muppet to space? How could engineers know it would blow up and get silenced? What did the White House hide about the crew's final moments? Strap in. We're exposing what NASA still doesn't want you to question. But before we begin, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel to support our community. Initially constructed during 1975 as an experimental craft for the Shuttle Initiative, Challenger was not converted into a functional orbiter before 1979. Its maiden flight occurred in 1983 for the operation featuring the program's inaugural extravehicular activity. This would not mark Challenger's sole involvement in groundbreaking events. It also transported America's pioneering woman astronaut, Sally Ride, alongside the first black astronaut, Guion Bluford. Challenger's journey was anticipated as momentous due to a crew member, 37-year-old Krista McAuliffe. Typically a social studies instructor at Concord High School in New Hampshire, McAuliffe earned selection via NASA's Educator in Space project to become the initial teacher in orbit. Aimed at motivating youth and securing public attention for NASA, the scheme involved McAuliffe joining Challenger's crew in space to conduct lessons during the flight. Owing to McAuliffe's role, media coverage of the liftoff was extensive, with NASA supplying a direct satellite signal to many schools. Consequently, thousands of pupils, among them McAuliffe's own students, viewed the catastrophe live. Krista McAuliffe wasn't intended as the sole Challenger traveler who would fascinate children. NASA additionally worked to secure passage for Sesame Street's Big Bird aboard the shuttle. They even approached Carol Spinney, the cherished performer embodying the large yellow Muppet, regarding mission involvement. The proposal failed to gain authorization from flight directors. However, NASA verified in 2015 that discussions with Spinney and Sesame Street's producers indeed occurred. The mission pilot, designated STS-51L by NASA, was Mike Smith. This would represent both his inaugural and final spaceflight. Smith also possesses the unique status of uttering the final statement recorded from any Challenger crew member. Immediately preceding the explosion, the orbiter's audio system registered Smith saying, "Oh," showing that at minimum one astronaut recognized a problem. Pilot Mike Smith was not alone in sensing trouble before the catastrophe. Indeed, the night prior to liftoff, engineers employed by NASA contractor Morton Theokohl attempted to persuade leadership to postpone the flight. A conference occurred wherein the engineers highlighted the scheduled launch would happen amid colder temperatures than any prior shuttle mission. This mattered because the rubber O-rings sealing shuttle segments often malfunctioned in cold. Regrettably, management dismissed the engineers' concerns. One such engineer, Bob Ebeling, came home from that meeting and informed his wife, "It's going to blow up." Years afterward, Ebeling would reflect that NASA was determined to proceed, intending to demonstrate globally their correctness and competence. But they were mistaken. Ebeling retired subsequent to the tragedy. Years later, he informed press that his choice to comply with the directives following the override troubled him throughout his remaining days. The Morton Theokohl engineers proved entirely correct in their warnings. The launch happened amid sub-freezing conditions. As the shuttle ascended, the O-ring seal on the right solid rocket booster malfunctioned. Superheated gases leaked from the booster and effectively disintegrated the attachment, linking it to the shuttle's external tank. This produced a lethal combination of hydrogen and liquid oxygen. At 46,000 feet altitude, the mixture detonated, transforming Challenger's fuel reservoir into an enormous fireball. Despite the blast, the solid fuel external boosters remained intact and continued propelling the shuttle upward. Directly after the catastrophe, a common belief held that the shuttle crew perished immediately. Yet subsequent evidence indicated a considerably grimmer possibility, one NASA had tried to conceal. Tropic magazine of the Miami Herald conducted its own probe into the mishap, showing that, unlike initial claims, the orbiter's cabin did not lose pressure during the blast. This implies the astronauts were probably conscious throughout the entire 3-mile lethal fall from the sky to the Atlantic Ocean underneath. This finding is supported by the reality that multiple crew members managed to manually switch on their individual emergency oxygen supplies. Though spaceflight is extremely perilous, before the Challenger tragedy, NASA had not suffered any astronaut fatalities during space missions. Indeed, the sole prior deaths within the program were those of Apollo 1 crew members Roger Chaffee, Virgil Gus Grissom, and Edward White, all killed in a blaze during a ground-based test on January 27, 1967. January 28th marked not only Challenger's intended launch date, but also the day planned for President Ronald Reagan's State of the Union speech. However, with the catastrophe merely 6 hours old, the President chose to postpone the yearly address and personally brief the American public about the disaster. The Space Shuttle Challenger crew honored us through how they conducted their lives. This address would later be celebrated among Reagan's finest, a significant tribute to a leader known as the Great Communicator. The Challenger explosion dispersed debris across a huge expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, with salvage teams spending weeks retrieving all fragments. Indeed, naval divers required 6 weeks to finally find the crew compartment's resting spot, 100 feet underwater, roughly 15 miles east of Cape Canaveral. The astronauts' remains were retrieved. Those identifiable were sent to families. Unidentified remains received burial beneath a memorial at Arlington National Cemetery. Post-disaster investigations concluded NASA had knowingly breached launch regulations. Engineers had cautioned management that temperatures were dangerously low for launch. Proceeding under such cold violated NASA's established protocols. A past NASA chief scientist, Ken Elliff, subsequently asserted this disregard for procedures was the accident's root cause. Why then did NASA dismiss warnings and proceed? Numerous factors shaped the launch choice, but the Rogers Commission observed that aiming to accelerate launch frequency to meet NASA's target of 24 annual missions, the agency overextended its personnel and infrastructure. This push for heightened launch rates was directly linked to the Space Shuttle program's survival, striving to meet its design purpose as a sole launch system fulfilling the nation's expanding commercial, scientific, and military launch demands. The Challenger blast made global news, prompting immediate demands to halt the entire Space Shuttle program. This pause lasted 3 years, while NASA enacted safety improvements advised by a presidential board, the Rogers Commission. The commission, featuring notable astronauts such as Neil Armstrong and Sally Ride, was created to avert future similar catastrophes, largely succeeding. NASA wouldn't endure another tragedy until 2003. That event involved Space Shuttle Columbia disintegrating during re-entry. Challenger debris persisted in washing onto Florida's coast long afterward. For instance, in December 1996, nearly 11 years post-explosion, Cocoa Beach visitors over 20 miles from Kennedy Space Center discovered 2 large shuttle sections in the waves. The fragments were so substantial, NASA employed a front-end loader to remove them from the shore. Civilian Krista McAuliffe's death proved especially harmful to the space program, with consequences lasting decades. In fact, 22 years elapsed before NASA launched another non-professional astronaut. Notably, that civilian was Barbara Morgan, Krista McAuliffe's designated substitute for the initial Challenger flight. Morgan, who, similar to McAuliffe, was an instructor of social studies and English, joined Space Shuttle Endeavour's crew for a successful 2007 mission. During its final flight, Challenger transported more than crew members and scientific gear. It also carried a soccer ball. Astronaut Ellison Onizuka had packed a ball previously used by his daughter Janelle's high school soccer squad. Remarkably, this soccer ball survived the disaster intact within the shuttle debris. It was given back to Onizuka's daughter, who permitted its exhibition as a memorial at Clear Lake High School. 30 years afterward, astronaut Shane Kimbrough, whose daughter also attended Clear Lake, requested to take the ball aboard a mission to the International Space Station. The school agreed. In February 2017, Kimbrough shared an emotional image from the ISS showing Onizuka's soccer ball suspended in weightlessness. Decades later, the Challenger still whispers warnings. A soccer ball survived hell to reach space. A backup teacher finally flew 22 years too late. Debris still washes ashore like ghostly reminders. But the greatest mystery remains. How could an agency built on genius ignore engineers who knew it would explode? Why silence cabin evidence that the crew felt their fall? What pressures truly forced that launch on Apollo 1's haunted anniversary? NASA fixed the O-rings. But did they fix the culture? Columbia, SpaceX near misses, the rush to Mars. Is history repeating? You decide. Which unthinkable truth shocked you most? Could this happen again? What should never be sacrificed for progress? Sound off below. This isn't history. It's a cautionary tale.